Contemporary reading, The Seven Sisters Songline by Margot Neal. All civilizations have epic sagas to explain the creation of Earth and transmit cultural values. The Seven Sisters Songline is one of Australia's most significant foundation stories. It tells of an ancestral being in the form of a man who wrongfully pursues seven sisters to possess them. To lure them to him, he shapeshifts into water, shade, and various delectable foods, which the women need to survive in the desert. In this way, the story relays information that is critical for survival on this continent. The many encounters the sisters have with their relentless pursuer result in the creation of the country, the evidence of which is recorded in the features of the landscape. They travel in an easterly direction across the continent from a place near Roebourne in the west, sometimes disappearing beneath the earth before leaping into the night sky, always leaving a tracery of sites of significance. It is a tale of tragedy and comedy, obsession and trickery, desire and loss, solidarity and sorrow that touches on life's moral dimensions, how to live with each other on this earth in a sustainable way, how to care for each other and share resources equitably. It also instructs on gender relations, kinship, marriage rules, and other codes of behaviour. These lessons are embodied in compelling tales of intrigue, drama, and passion that connect people and places across time. In this way, the story has been easily remembered and willingly retold to each generation for millennia. It is a saga of mythological dimensions and meanings. For the challenge of Indigenous knowledge, we give thanks.
Listen for words of faith in the Gospel of John. As God has loved me, so have I loved you. Live on in my love. And you will live on in my love if you keep my commandments, just as I live on in God's love and have kept God's commandments. I tell you all this, that my joy may be yours and your joy may be complete. This is my commandment: love one another as I have loved you. There is no greater love than to lay down one's life for one's friends. And you are my friends if you do what I command you. I no longer speak of you as subordinates, because a subordinate doesn't know a superior's business. Instead, I call you friends, because I have made known to you everything I have learned from God. It was not you who chose me. It was I who chose you to go forth and bear fruit. Your fruit must endure, so that whatever you ask of God in my name, God will give you. This command I give you, that you love one another. For the challenge of the gospel, we give thanks.
Today we reflect on what climate change means to us as people of faith. I have 2 great-grandchildren, aged 9 and 12. All of us have children and young people in our lives. So, of course, climate change matters. But does that have anything to do with being people of faith? Or is that irrelevant? We hope to explore that today with you as we share our personal stories.
Thanks, Bill. What does climate change mean to me as a person of faith? Salam sejahtera, that's my Malay greetings and good morning to all. As we gathered in this sacred space, I am drawn to share my reflections on my upbringing as a native of Sabah in Malaysia. Growing up in the heart of Sabah in Borneo Island, Malaysia, was like being immersed in a living painting of nature's finest work. My hometown, tucked away amidst the dense forests, was a paradise teeming with life. Every day was an adventure, filled with the sights and sounds of vibrant flora and fauna. From the majestic rainforests, echoing with the calls of exotic birds, to the serene rivers where colorful fish danced beneath the surface, nature was my playground. I remember those days fondly, where every corner of my village held a new discovery, from the intricate patterns of leaves to the melodious calls of unseen creatures. But in 2009, I embarked on a journey far away from home, leaving behind the sanctuary of my beloved Sabah. Though I have since built a life in Australia, the memories of my homeland linger, a bittersweet melody that tugs at my heartstrings. Yet, as the years have passed, I've witnessed firsthand the changes in the climate and the unpredictable weather patterns that have become the new norm. I'm not alone in this observation. I am sure many others in my community share my concerns about the shifting environment. As an Orang Asli, or native Malaysian, my connection to the land, water, and all living beings is not just a cultural trait. It's a fundamental part of who I am. For generations, my community has lived in harmony with nature. Our customs and traditions deeply intertwined with the rhythms of the environment. Whether it's the lush rainforests of Peninsular Malaysia or the pristine waters of Sabah and Sarawak, our way of life is inseparable from the natural world. But now, the looming threat of climate change casts a dark shadow over these sacred connections. Rising temperatures, erratic weather patterns, and rising sea levels jeopardize the delicate balance of ecosystems essential to our way of life. Changes in rainfall patterns could disrupt our agricultural cycles, while coastal erosion threatens our sacred sites and ancestral land, severing the spiritual bond between our people and the earth. The impact of our livelihoods is profound. Hunting, fishing, and subsistence agriculture have sustained us for centuries, providing not just food and shelter, but also cultural identity and social cohesion. Yet, the effects of climate change pose a dire threat to these traditional practices. Declining fish stocks, diminishing crop yields, and loss of biodiversity undermine our ability to sustain ourselves and our community. Unpredictable weather patterns make it increasingly challenging to predict the best times for planting and harvesting, leading to food insecurity and economic instability. Moreover, despite contributing minimally to these causes of climate change, indigenous communities like ours, bear a disproportionate burden of its impacts. This injustice deepens existing vulnerabilities within our community, perpetuating cycles of marginalization and discrimination. Government policies often prioritize economic growth over environmental conservation, further eroding our land rights and access to basic services. As climate change threatens to reshape our landscapes, it also endangers the rich tapestry of traditional ecological knowledge passed down through generations. Efforts to document and preserve this knowledge should be prioritized to ensure its continuity and relevance in the face of a rapidly changing climate. As a person of faith, I recognize the sacred duty entrusted to humanity to care for the earth and its inhabitants. For indigenous communities in Malaysia, this spiritual responsibility is deeply ingrained in our cultural practices and rituals. Climate change represents a moral imperative, challenging us to act as stewards of the earth and guardians of future generations. By embracing principles of compassion, solidarity, and collective actions, we can advocate for environmental justice and uphold the sacredness of all life. Thank you.
I observe climate change as I observe all forms of systemic desecration, at once from within and from afar. Like a few of us here, I'm Catholic by my upbringing, but I choose to celebrate my faith in this congregation. But there's a stickiness to Catholicism, so forgive me for dredging some of it around with me. A formative part of how I understand the world is through the principle of sacramentality, that we encounter God's presence in the ordinariness of the world, that being present with any tangible element of creation through love, aid, touch, celebration, silence is a sacrament, that it imparts and reveals divinity. Secular people sometimes describe a similar concept. We are the universe perceiving itself, stardust looking back up at itself. So in understanding climate change as a form of systemic desecration, what I mean is that it involves a violent refusal to look and love. The decisions long since made to pump greenhouse gases into the atmosphere have already narrowed the windows in which my disabled body can safely and comfortably navigate the world. Extremes in humidity, temperature, and air pollution cause me exhaustion and symptom flares. Nobody looked me in the eyes when they triggered my tachycardia yesterday. That's how systems work. Transphobic lawmakers and journalists are not looking the little trans boy in the eyes when they criminalize the love his mother shows him in smuggling his testosterone across the border. God's love in creation of the transsexual body. If I receive the literal to Catholics sacrament of marriage, its registration would trigger a chain of algorithms that would almost certainly cancel my pension. These are systems that refuse to look at the creation they desecrate and the potential future sacraments that they interrupt. My chosen families are made up of mostly other disabled trans people. We understand these systems viscerally. This is why so many of us have looked to more radical political philosophies. There's a lot of socialists and communists and anarchists in these circles. Climate change is just one part of a wider vision that we have to structure society without the destruction of human potential. It's daunting. I don't know if it's possible. So as well as attending the rallies and the protests and the petitions, we also build local networks of care and mutual aid. A little garden carved out from the rest of the world. Laura Portwood Stacer describes this form of radical activism as lifestyle politics. Many of us apply anarchist principles to how we work and love and hold space for community. Just in terms of climate activism, I might be at somebody's birthday and we're all discussing strategies to manage temperature dysautonomia, or someone is offering me their flat to shelter in the air conditioning during an upcoming heat wave. Or we're bulk purchasing PPE to share when we meet at a community event so that we can manage bushfire smoke and COVID transmission. This is love one another as I have loved you. Just spending time with my friends like this is the sacrament that makes me feel closest to God. Being surrounded by laughter, music, and care, just as Psalm 98 evokes. Using our hands and holy arms to bring deliverance, victory to each other. Now, my friends aren't religious and they certainly wouldn't use this language, but they do still describe their experience in these spaces as spiritual or divine, which I think is telling. Most of us sacrificed a lot to build these networks. It usually takes restructuring your entire life, unlearning core beliefs about your place in the world, compulsory heterosexuality, mononormativity, internalized ableism, all of these culturally grounded systems. We still cop a fair bit of all of that when we're in mainstream society, but much less so in our subcultures. They don't live in our heads anymore. I can let my body rest when it's tired now, alone or in company, instead of disciplining myself for being unproductive. But you can't unlearn climate change. It's an effect of capitalist and industrial systems that's already here. So the community organising and care that we do, the sharing information in PPE and air-conditioned homes, that all helps to reduce the human toll, and that's really important. But to my mind, the core victory of our lifestyle politics is one that we have already achieved. We've made ourselves living proof that there's a better way of running things.
I grew up in a household that did not practice religion, although my mother had been raised a Catholic and father Protestant. Also, he was a Freemason. We were taught to accept people as people, whatever their religion, nationality, race, or sexuality. My mother had lost her loved eldest brother at Gallipoli, and this shaped our family's leaning towards pacifism. In 1948, we moved from the flat behind my father's pharmacy in Balgowlah to a new house on a bushy block at Manly Vale. We could walk through the bush to Manly Dam, which was a wonderful playground for me and my brother and our friends. So you can see some of the values that are shaping me as I was growing up. I came to faith as a teenager at All Saints Church of England, Balgowlah. When it came time for all the youth to be confirmed, I had to be baptised first, as this had not happened when I was a baby. When I was in final year of high school at a Christian camp for boys, we were warned about two particular dangers at university: girls and the student Christian movement. I'm not sure what the girls at the girls' camp were warned about. Having renounced the devil and all his works, it was not surprising that on entering university, I joined the Evangelical Union. After about a year in the EU, I was feeling a bit out of things, and when some friends told me they were praying for me, I knew it was time to make a move. So I jumped ship and joined the student Christian movement. There I discovered progressive theology, the freedom to question, plus girls, or a particular girl. When Ruth and I married, we decided to be Congregationalists, Ruth's family denomination. The Congregationalists were open, accepting of all and sundry, were democratic, and ordained women. Between 1963 and 1990, we were part of the congregational, later Uniting Church community at Cheltenham and Epping, a wonderful, progressive and forward-looking congregation. When it comes to matters of faith, I have to confess that I am a doubting Thomas. No wonder my EU friends felt compelled to pray for me. I just don't like to be told that I have to believe this, that, or the other to be an okay Christian. And there are some bits in the Bible that make my hair stand on end. Read it from cover to cover. But there are some parts that resonate with this old lefty. Particularly, of course, Jesus and his teachings and how he lived and how he related to people, as well as the way he challenged the powers of his time. Also, I can connect with much of what we find in the writings of the prophets, such as this from Micah. With what shall I come before the Lord and bow myself before God on high? Shall I bring before him burnt offerings with calves a year old? Will the Lord be pleased with thousands of rams, with tens of thousands of rivers of oil? Shall I give my firstborn for my transgression, the fruit of my body for the sin of my soul? He has told you, O mortal, what is good, and what does the Lord require of you but to do justice and to love kindness and to walk humbly with your God? He has told you, O mortal, what is good, and what does the Lord require of you but to do justice and to love kindness and to walk humbly with the God. As a person of faith, to me, this is what it is all about. To do justice, to be actively seeking a fair world for human society and for all living beings. To love kindness, to be relating kindly and respectfully with one another at a personal level. To walk humbly with our God. To be travelling life's path, seeing it as a spiritual journey. Like many of you, I've been part of the growing awareness of the impact of climate change. Dave, in his reflection, told us from his own lived experience what is happening to his home communities in Sabah. Climate change, which has been the result of industrialisation that has given wealth to some communities, is having its greatest impact on the poorest communities. Trinity has told us about how, in her own very personal lived experience, the effects of climate change impacts on the health of people with disabilities. Climate change is a social justice issue. That is why so many people of faith have become activists. Our cover photo on our order of service is one example. So show up at demos. There's one next week outside Kirribilli House. We might write letters, sign petitions, support organisations such as ARC or Climate Council or Greenpeace and so on. Chain ourselves to stuff if that's what we need to do. We might support or get involved with political parties or candidates that have climate action on their platform. This is Micah's doing justice. Dave's memories of growing up in Sabah reflect the wisdom of Indigenous people across the globe. The Seven Sisters songline is all about a wisdom that sees the natural world, plants, fish, birds, animals, the landscape and people as being interrelated, interconnected and interdependent. In this worldview, people are co-partners within the web of creation, not dominators. It is only now that non-Indigenous Australians are starting to recognise this. Jesus said, "This is my commandment, that you love one another as I have loved you." There's no point in being a social justice activist or a climate warrior if you don't have a real love for the planet, its creatures and its people. This means that you'll have deep joy from walking in the bush, in the park or along a beach. You'll find delight in your close relationships, but also in fleeting interactions with the parent and child on the train or the young student serving you at a checkout. This is Micah's loving kindness. I was moved by Trinity's image of the little garden of care and mutual support, a needed safe place. When you have someone close to you with dementia, you learn the value of the present moment, because that is where your loved one is and where you also must be. Finding the gift of the present moment opens us to the wonder of everything. For me, this is where I can walk humbly with God. For me, this is my safe garden.